Triumphant Light has been out for a week now, and has given some added strength to popular meta decks like Dialga EX and Celebi EX. But one of the strongest decks in the early days of this format was a huge thanks to the new Sudowoodo. I'm Nova from TCG, and today we're going to break down how to play Rampardos in the Triumphant Light format. Starting with the pros and cons, this deck revolves around a fast and aggressive playstyle. Taking full advantage of using only single point Pokemon, this deck loves to hit hard throughout all stages of the game with low energy cost attacks. Thanks to the fighting type being so versatile, this deck has plenty of options for secondary attackers that cover Rampardos' weaknesses. That said, this deck's greatest asset is its ability to handle EX Pokemon with ease. However, with Rampardos being a Stage 2 attacker, this deck isn't always the most consistent. Combine that with reliance on a Stage 1 utility Pokemon in Lucario for maximum damage, and this deck can fall behind pretty quickly. Due to this deck's reckless playstyle and low HP counts, if you're not ahead, then you're probably behind. Taking a look at the key Pokemon, this deck's primary attacker is Rampardos. Rampardos is a 150 HP Stage 2 fighting type with the Head Smash attack. For 1 fighting energy, this attack does a 130 damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. The only drawback is that if the attack knocks out the opposing Pokemon, Rampardos also does 50 damage to itself. This makes Rampardos great for dealing massive blows to EXs early on, but taking early knockouts with it can be a bit volatile. Knowing when to attack with Rampardos and when to let secondary attackers take the lead is where skill expression and experience come into play when piloting this deck. Sudowoodo is arguably the best first turn fighting type due to the popularity of EXs in the meta, which makes it the perfect secondary attacker for this deck. The 80 HP basic deals 20 damage for 1 fighting energy, which is increased to 50 damage if the opposing Pokemon is an EX. With Lucario on the bench, this is increased to 70 and in rare cases 90 if you're able to set up 2 Lucario. This allows you to potentially knock out every basic EX in 2 hits before they've even fully set up, all while setting up your Rampardos in the back to clean up once Sudowoodo has done its job. As one of the best utility Pokemon in the game, Lucario is the glue that's holding pretty much every fighting type deck together right now. Lucario's Fighting Coach ability adds 20 damage to all attacks used by your fighting type Pokemon into your opponent's active Pokemon, and it stacks if you have 2. This pushes Rampardos to 170 maximum damage and Sudowoodo to 90. It can't be understated how vital Lucario is to the deck's engine. The only key item in this deck is, of course, Skull Fossil. You can evolve into Cranidos and subsequently Rampardos if you don't play Skull Fossil on the bench first. An important note to make with this deck is that even though Rampardos is the primary attacker, Cranidos is also a valid option if it's not in danger of being knocked out after attacking. 50 damage for 1 energy even before factoring in Lucario on the bench is pretty solid damage. Moving on to fill cards, Marshadow is really the only other Pokemon worth including in this deck. Being able to dish out between 100 and 140 damage after suffering a knockout really helps this deck lean into its aggression. It also provides a lot of freedom in the early stages of games, as you're really never concerned with giving away your first point. Taking a look at the items, Pokeball is the first fill item you should be running. While it isn't always as useful in this deck compared to some others, it still holds a lot of value. Since the Rampardos line can't be searched with Pokeball, you'll mostly look to use Pokeball for an early Riolu or hold it to guarantee a Marshadow in the late game. Pokemon communication is massively important for this deck, as anything that helps to find Cranidos and Rampardos is practically a necessity. Sudowoodo becomes pretty irrelevant in the late game, especially against non-EX decks, and Marshadow isn't as valuable in the early game. Being able to swap either of these for a potentially guaranteed Cranidos or Rampardos is really helpful and gives your secondary attackers a little more value. Closing out our fill options with the supporters, we first have Professor's Research. Arguably more vital in this deck than most others, Professor's Research is this deck's most reliable way to find Cranidos and Rampardos in the early game. Knowing when to play PR to find the Rampardos line in clutch scenarios versus opting into other attackers is really important for this deck's piloting. The next supporter is a pocket classic in Sabrina. While Sabrina had initially fallen off a bit with the introduction of Cyrus, non-spread damage decks are coming back around and really showcasing the value Sabrina still has in the meta. Sabrina is really good into decks that run fewer bench Pokemon, and is good for closing out games against weakened opponents. In addition, Sabrina can be really helpful for securing leads for this deck's early games by opening up early knockouts into non-evolved basics. The final card to consider for a Rampardos deck is Cyrus. While Cyrus isn't as useful in an aggressive beatdown deck compared to spread decks, it can't be understated how valuable Cyrus is as a counter into opponents switching out. Similar to Sabrina, Cyrus is great for securing wins in games that could otherwise be taken from you. Due to its straightforward philosophy, this deck doesn't necessarily favor certain deck archetypes over others. It more so comes down to individual matchups that Rampardos handles well or struggles against. Some decks Rampardos plays well into are Dialga EX, Palkia EX, and Pachirisu EX. Some decks to watch out for are Darkrai EX, Leafeon EX, and Gyarados EX. If you're looking to play Rampardos, then here's the list we recommend. 2 Rampardos, 2 Cranidos, 2 Lucario, 2 Riolu, 1 Sudowoodo, 1 Marshadow, 2 Skull Fossil, 2 Pokeball, 2 Pokemon Communication, 2 Professor's Research, 1 Sabrina, and 1 Cyrus. That wraps up our Rampardos deck profile. If you found this video helpful, feel free to like and subscribe. Be sure to check out our socials and join our community on Discord too. Good luck in your games, and thanks for watching.